What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of what is the best Marvel original film. Last time I did, this is obviously a part two. Last time I did Iron Man versus Captain America, the First Avenger, and Iron Man won. Spoiler alert, Iron Man won. Today I'm doing Guardians of the Galaxy versus the original Thor. So let's get into seeing which one is better. Alright, so first up, let's talk about the original Guardians of the Galaxy, and let's talk about the main characters. So, Guardians of the Galaxy, it's kind of one of these weird movies to where they don't really have, like, a main character. Yes, without a doubt, Peter Quill is the main character of this film, but obviously, Drax, Gamora, Rocket, and, Groot all take a lot of screen time up as well, and they just work absolutely amazing as a team. So, I'll be talking about all of them together as the main characters, and like I said, in every single movie they're in, they're so, great together. And like I said, I won't be talking about every single movie, just the original Guardians of the Galaxy. But like I said, there's just not a lot to say that hasn't already been said. So let's move on to Thor. All right, so obviously the main character of Thor is Thor, and I like him in this movie, but I also think there's problems with Thor, the movie, and just Thor, the character in this film. I find him kind of boring in this movie when he's on Asgard, but I really do like everything, especially when he's on Earth. I think it's funny, with Jane and her friends, and he just, doesn't know what to do. I like all that stuff, but everything on Asgard I think is just kind of boring. And, when you compare him to the Guardians of the Galaxy, who are, always hilarious, and, they're all so funny when they're together, I just think Thor is just not as good as a character in this movie. And so I think the Guardians of the Galaxy are better than Thor so far. All right, so let's get into the villains. The villains of Guardians of the Galaxy is Ronan, in which he's one of the villains to where I really don't have a lot to say about this dude. He's in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, and that's really all I can say about him. I know, I'm trying to say things that are memorable, but he's just not that memorable, So for Guardians of the Galaxy, they have better villains in the other two films, but in this film, he's just not that great. Alright, so the villain of Thor is obviously Loki as well as the Frost Giants. I like Loki in this film. He's one of the best MCU villains overall, but I do think this definitely isn't one of Loki's best appearances as a villain, but he's still good in this movie. Obviously, the brother of Thor. Turns out they're not actually related, and he wants to take over the throne for Odin. It's a great story. The Frost Giants, I really have nothing to say about them, but obviously, I like Loki a lot. So that movie definitely has that going for it because, like I said, this movie's just fine, but Loki is good in this film so far. So let's talk about the plot of Guardians of the Galaxy. So the plot of Guardians of the Galaxy is there are these criminals who are obviously the Guardians of the Galaxy, and they want to escape from prison. So they escape from prison, and they figure out they have to work together to, save, obviously, the galaxy. But the story for me really isn't, it isn't really about, the plot. It's more about building up these characters, to have a team that, really cares for each other. And the relationships between the characters are absolutely great in this movie and in every single other movie that they're in. And so that's what I feel like is most important for this movie is just building these characters up, building up all their relationships. And that's what it does the absolute best for this film. All right, so the plot of Thor is Thor almost causes a war with the Frost Giants, and Odin is absolutely, this dude is so mad at Thor, and he sends him off to Earth. He takes all of his powers, and he just leaves Thor on Earth. And basically, Thor has to fight, a villain on Earth without any powers, and he proves to Odin that, he is, a hero. And at the end of the movie, everything is, good. Everything is fine at the end of the movie. But I honestly think that Guardians of the Galaxy has a better plot, although, again, the plot isn't even a big part of that film. I still think it's better than Thor. For Thor, this movie's fine. Thor is fine in the movie. The villains are fine. In the plot, again, it's just fine. I don't think, that this movie isn't one of my favorite movies, obviously, and like I said, I think the plot is better in Guardians of the Galaxy, but this movie, it's just fine for me. All right, so I don't think this is a surprise to anybody, but I think Guardians of the Galaxy is the better film out of the two. Like I said, I think the characters are better. I think the plot's better. I just think almost everything about this movie is better. You know, the relationships between characters, even just like the music's great in Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't know how I just now mentioned that, but the music is absolutely phenomenal in that film as well. It's just overall the better film, meaning it moves on to the second round of the bracket in the movie bracket along with Iron Man, and I will see y'all in the next video. See you guys.